Hey everybody, another video here for you today. Now yesterday in my ancient history news video, I had at least one comment, and I've had a few other comments around this subject. Who the heck built Gobekli Tepe? One of the most famous sites now in the world as far as ancient history. Pre-pottery, Neolithic, hunter-gatherers, who built this? Well, it's time we give an answer here. Here's the famous site with so much research and speculation. Gobekli Tepe up here on top of this rise. Who built this site? Well, let's just talk about that. Here's a look from the site. Only maybe 5 to 10% of the ruins here have been excavated. Here is the view overlooking the whole plain to the south. If you look really close, people say you can see ancient Hureyra from on top of this hill. That might be it right there. Here's an area below the top of the mound. Certain holes are kind of carved out of the ground in here. Evidence of human occupation going back to the Younger Dryas period. Here is a look at the top of the mound up here, where the roof is now covering some of the ruins. Who built this? Well, now that I made a lot of videos coming from this region, from this time period, 13,000 to 11,000 years ago, do we know who built this place? Well, I think we can give it a pretty good guess. Here's an ancient history news video I made on April 20th. And it says, human figure detected on 14,000-year-old burial slab in Israel, and I go over the Natufians. I also talked about them in my Jordan desert ruins. And I speculated, did they have anything to do with Gobekli Tepe? And I really wondered, and I've looked into it a little more since. I didn't mention it in my Jericho video. They are associated with the earliest periods of occupation at that site. I wanted to save it for this video. The Natufians and Gobekli Tepe. I think that's the best answer. Now, reading about the Natufian culture, they are a late Epipaleolithic archaeological culture that existed from around 12,000 BC to 9,500 BC, or 13,000 to 7,550 BC. And just reading about the research on these people, these are just very general guesses. There is nothing pinpointed about these people. These are very general answers. Here is the range where they lived, and it's a widespread area. You notice it goes all the way up to Abu Hureyra, and that is the place I talked about in this video that got destroyed by an impact event 12,800 years ago. And then there seems to be some different periods of occupation before and after, and it's kind of vague. Here's a pic from 1928. This is Dorothy Garrod in the middle. She is the one who kind of discovered this culture and did the first research on it about 90 years ago. Here's our temperature graph of Greenland ice cores. Here's our current era of global temperatures. We go back to the Younger Dryas period. We had fluctuations that would freak the heck out of us today. What accounted for this? That's a big question. Here is the period that these Natufians were living in, this Younger Dryas period, and they were associated with the site where an impact event happened. I think that's pretty important. This map of the Natufians, their most northern, most spread out areas where they inhabited, only 60, 70 miles from Gobekli Tepe, even closer to ancient Orion and other Neolithic sites that go back to the Younger Dryas period. I think these people were extended all the way up into the Gobekli Tepe region. That is not a stretch at all. There was definitely stone structures that these people built and lived in. There was also kind of more primitive camps like this. Where does this come from? This comes from the San Lurfa Museum, right next to Gobekli Tepe. Here are the remains of a Natufian house made out of stone. These people seem to be the first to practice ritualistic burial practices. And it seems they were looking to the heavens also. Here's a clip from my ancient history news video. These people seem to have a period where they might have lived in caves in the area, maybe because of the climate, maybe because of an impact event. These seem to be the first people to practice some sort of agriculture. They had floors in their houses. They practiced ritualistic burials. And it seems their civilization spread out almost all the way to Gobekli Tepe. Did it go all the way there? I think it did. Here is an artist conception of what this figure is right here. I think this is Orion. I think they were watching the skies. It's in the posture of Orion. People theorize they were looking at Orion at Gobekli Tepe. Here's a video I made on April 19th, 2017, Gobekli Tepe, the dire warning of Pillar 43, and how I thought this depicted an impact event. Here's a story from just 5 days after I made my video, April 24, 2017, when all these stories came out. Ancient stone pillars offer clues of comet strike that changed human history. All these stories came out 5 days after my video. It's nice that your channel gets watched. But here's Pillar 43. The connection here is not hard to make. The site is just 60-70 miles northwest of Abu Hureyra and one other site where there is evidence of an impact event. Now, if you had survivors of that culture, what was the one thing that they would depict? Probably when their culture or city got taken out and the survivors would have joined with other people in erecting the monument of that time. Here it is right here, Gobekli Tepe. If your culture almost got wiped out by an impact event, what would be a pretty important thing to you? Probably repopulating the world. Here's a figurine coming from the Natufians, a lot like representations we have at Gobekli Tepe and other sites in the region coming from that time period. Here is a Natufian burial. Some of these were placed under floors in homes, just like places you see like Çatalhöyük and other places that kind of sprang out of Gobekli Tepe, but obviously some beads or something around the head, ornamentation. These people took the afterlife seriously. Here are some artifacts and dates from the Natufians. They certainly knew how to manipulate stonework. They seemed to be pretty sophisticated. They had rituals. They were watching the sky. Did they build Gobekli Tepe? I think that's the best answer. Woman's pelvis decorated with fox teeth. The way they incorporated animals into their symbolism and just what's found on the pillars. I think this is your best bet. I think these were the people who built Gobekli Tepe. Here's a face figurine from the Natufians. It just seems like they did things the way the people were doing things up at Gobekli Tepe. Here is an ornamented skull coming from the Natufians. They certainly had not a simple view of the afterlife, that is for sure. It was quite complex. Their cosmology was in place 12,000 years ago, and the fact that they viewed Orion and Cygnus and other celestial bodies probably aligned them with certain things at Gobekli Tepe. I think that's very important. If we're going to put a name on the people who built Gobekli Tepe, the Natufians are probably the most likely candidates. They built a lot of circular stone enclosures. They viewed the heavens. That seemed to be clear. They had a view of the afterlife. One of their cities right by here got destroyed 12,800 years ago. Now, what would you do if that happened to you or survivors of your culture? You would commemorate that event somewhere. A lot of animals disappeared and people disappeared at the time. You would commemorate it in a temple right nearby. I think that's who built this. Here's a circular stone enclosure coming from the Natufians. Here are some holes bored in the ground, just like a lot of those places near Gobekli Tepe. Other sites I have talked about that resemble Gobekli Tepe. Here's a stone enclosure coming from the Natufians. Is this aligned to a sunset some way? Well, maybe. I think they were viewing the sky from up here a long time ago. Maybe commemorated an event where people got destroyed. A lot of people have speculated they were watchers up here, watchers of the skies. Well, something from the heavens impacted on Earth and destroyed my culture. I'd be watching the skies too. Orion seemed to be important. Why? He was the guardian of the skies. That is my video on the Natufians and Gobekli Tepe. Their time period matches this culture when they were lost, what they were viewing. Hope you thought that was cool. And you all have a very safe day.